Generative AI is disrupting the business model for digital agencies in a major way. Services that they used to bill for by the hour can now be generated in minutes by LLMs. And this leaves agencies with an existential question. If value isn't built around generating content, what do they do instead? Sam Rahimi is the VP of Earned and Owned Media at AdCelerant, a major Yext partner and a global white label digital marketing agency. In his role, Sam has a front row seat to this disruption, and he and his team are taking aggressive steps to deliver value in a new way. Let's get into it. Hi, Sam. Welcome to the Visibility Brief.
Thanks, Rebecca. Appreciate you having me.
Before we dive into all of the really exciting conversations we have queued up for today, I would love for you to tell us and our listeners a bit more about AdCelerant.
Yeah, for sure. So AdCelerant is a Denver-based advertising suite. We have many functions of the business, but the primary role is that we kind of work in a white label capacity for like sales enablement and fulfillment. We've been around for 13, 14 years now. And over that time, we've definitely evolved. We've expanded out of the United States. Now we're in the UK and Canada. It's a new feat for us. It's been fun, exciting, and challenging. But our primary role is to again kind of be that fulfillment arm for a number of different styles of businesses. We came out of the publication space, so like TV, radio, newspaper, advertising type space. If you kind of dig into our founders and kind of where they came from, ultimately it was to kind of enable these kinds of businesses that over recent history have seen a little bit of a decline, kind of enable them with digital solutions, and AdCelerant really fills that void for them.
Well, you've been a trusted Yext partner for such a long time. I really appreciate that you're here chatting with us today. Tell me a bit about your role inside the organization.
Yeah, so I've been with AdCelerant for 8 years. This is my 8th year now, which is like crazy to say. I don't think I've done anything for 8 years, but I've been at AdCelerant for 8 years. But I was brought on to stand up effectively our SEO department. I oversee all earned and owned media, but I came from the agency side. I worked for a number of different agencies around the country, being kind of a practitioner of SEO. And I just truly came to love that topic. I mean, I think I remember in my college days seeing somebody present to me like how a search engine functioned. And I was like, I never thought about the intricacies of how this works. And that's, it just became such interest to me. And then AdCelerant came along, and they had, they were very unique because they worked with these large publications, but those larger publications work with the Main Street businesses. They work with the local guys, the small to medium size, primarily the small in many cases. Whereas I was working with like Fortune 500 companies and like large international brands. And while that was all well and good and very interesting and a great learning experience, I grew up in the back of a restaurant. So it was very near and dear. And I love like those small businesses are filled with people that obsess over something and turned it into a business, but maybe didn't have the business acumen.
Yes.
And I think that this is a great way of kind of giving back to that part of the economy, if you will.
That's incredible. So did your folks have a restaurant or family member?
Yeah, my dad was a full-time restaurant guy. He had 2 restaurants. He started with a bagel shop. He was Iranian. He had a Persian food restaurant for a long time there. So yeah, my bus stop was right out front of the restaurant.
I love that. My parents had a business too when I was in high school, and it's just like a mini storage business. And I loved working there, just kind of getting in, like balancing the books, shipping them. There's really something special about the small business and entrepreneur experience. And I think you just bring a lot of like grit, resilience.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah.
So you've got a passion for supporting small business.
Indeed. Yeah.
And I would also think that, because you work with so many digital agencies and things like that, you've got this macro level view into all of the things that are impacting them right now. And we know that AI is having this massive disruption, both for businesses out there as well as agencies that serve them. But there's also a big opportunity that it's created. So I'd be curious, what are you seeing from your perspective?
Um, I mean, right now it is a lot of confusion, a lot of like flustered kind of feelings, a lot of noise. I mean, if it, like even if I just think to like the SEO industry specifically, if you look back the last like 15, 20, 25 years, I've only been in the industry like 15, but you have to study a little bit beyond that. Every like 3 to 5 years, there's like some new acronym that pops up, right? Some new like landmine, like paradigm shift, whatever you'd like to call it, like that comes along and it creates a lot of buzz and talk. And oftentimes there's a necessity to kind of change, right? And the way that I've ultimately deemed this is the advanced tactics of yesterday are now just standardized tactics of today, right? That's like this natural advancement and evolution. And I think that that's ultimately what's happening here now. AI is, we can't deny it, like the speed at which that is changing. Like it's fast, unquestionably. But I think that right now we're in like that early stage noise phase, and I think that it's important for like agencies and businesses just alike to try to kind of recognize that there is no silver bullet. There will not be a silver bullet. And frankly, we're still learning what the heck these things are, how they function, how they absorb information, and how they kind of like parse it and redeliver it back into the world. So, as far as what we're seeing, I like that. I mean, it really varies. And I think AdCelerant is unique because we get such a broad spectrum. And we work with like multinational publications all the way down to one man, one woman agencies. And obviously their clientele spans a large spectrum. So we tend to run the gamut in terms of how people are using AI and where the disruption is. And right now, I'd say most, even the larger, more advanced agencies are still just trying to figure it all out. They obviously get into Claude or they get into Gemini or get into ChatGPT, and they kind of are using as their local therapist, or they're using as like some kind of like trip planner for them. But also people are now getting into building unique agents, and obviously MCP is a good kind of add-on, really applicable add-on to many different scenarios. But I think the learning curve is just still so steep. Even for us, I mean, we've got a full AI department, but as far as like where we're going to land in a year, and 3 years, and 5 years, it's still very much undefined. But I think the main thing that I take away from AI is its ability to more easily standardize certain advertising marketing methodology. Since the dawn of marketing, since the Don Draper days, we're talking about like the holistic approach to advertising and marketing is going to be more impactful. Okay, yes, we all agree with that. Now, since AI comes along, I think that it enables us to be a little bit more holistic. And to my earlier point, if yesterday's advanced is now today's standardized, well, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're advancing in a more seamless way.
Right. It's interesting when I think about the clients that you serve and the clients that they serve. A lot of small businesses and entrepreneurs, I imagine, are experimenting with AI and LLMs to generate content and to do jobs that maybe they were turning to the agencies to do on their behalf. So now they're feeling empowered.
Sure.
I can create a month's worth of social media content in an afternoon, or I can, to your point,
Yeah.
create all of these resources that are consistent and they seem to be on brand. So I imagine that's really disruptive to your experience. In a world like that, what does the agency's role become? What do they do instead if it's not about generating content?
Well, I mean that's the. I think that there's a few ways to kind of peel that back. I mean, AI is as good as the prompt that's inputted into it, right? And I'm sure that's going to evolve, and I'll be eating my words in a year. But so I think that a savvier agency needs to be kind of cognizant of the fact that like an elevated level of thinking, some strategic oversight, insight into an avenue or an opportunity that a business owner themselves couldn't come to, a connecting of the dots between all of the characteristics of a business, market level opportunity, and available technology, like a connecting of the dots between these components is where an agency still has to lie. And that I feel like has always been the case, but as far as like how that's been conducted obviously runs again across the spectrum. You're going to see a lot of businesses take things like social, organic social, in-house content creation, perhaps in-house. I think that businesses should definitely be focused on like internal efficacy, like internal processes and streamlining and these kinds of things, looking at data analysis. But I still think that the agency's role it exists. It's just now elevated. So if we're looking at kind of the products and services that we've offered in the last 5 years, and continuing to, or expecting rather, that we're going to continue to execute those over the next 5 years, that is obviously the wrong outlook. I think that there needs to be an elevated version of each of those kind of going forward. The other thing that I would add to that is kind of the early stage kind of sales and discovery conversations, particularly as an agency. The availability of AI in order to kind of intimately understand a business, and then therefore have a I call it the come around the table approach. I forget who actually came up with that concept, but there is a concept called come around the table. I'll have to look that one up. And just basically see things from their perspective, much more deeply, much more at a level that they understand and resonates with them, I think is where we need to be focused.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is it's less about the execution of the strategy and more about the idea, should we be executing that strategy? What do we know about your business that would make this particular strategy or tactic effective for you? And I think that that's great, which I think leads us to this idea of intelligence and insights and judgment. So
Yeah.
you mentioned the best agencies are acting from this place of intelligence. Where does that come from? How are you? Maybe let's take a step back. First of all, what kind of intelligence do you want to bring to your clients to give them the best guidance possible?
Oh man. Depends on the client.
Good.
Depends on the client, depends on their business structure. I mean, obviously it's going to depend on like the typical things, their average order value or contract value, their close rates, their margins. You always want to back out from those, those areas. But as far as the intelligence goes, I mean, like what if you look at SEO services, I mean, you could have 5 different SEOs work on the same account, and they would have 5 different strategies. And there would be a lot of overlap between how they approach those strategies. But I think that AI allows you to add some objectivity to what should be step 1, what should be step 2, what should be step 3, because otherwise I think it's just subjective based on like the experience of the campaign manager,
Sure.
and that's that's not always in the best interest of the actual client, the advertiser. So intelligence wise, I would start by like data analysis and prioritization of time and resources.
You mentioned a lot of your clients are serving local businesses, like the restaurant that your father owns. Um, how important is local information, local level insights for guiding strategy?
This is an area, and this is in fact an area where I think Yext has actually helped us out a lot. Like the availability of hyper local data is definitely a gap, I would say, just in the industry overall. I mean, in order to get and I would love to hear somebody tell me how to do this if they've got insight. I'm sure great people do. But in order to get like a hyper local competitive analysis, and then kind of use that to kind of inform very specific action and do that very quickly, like that has always been. I mean, we talk about competitive analyses, and have talked about them for years, and they can be lengthy and arduous and extremely time and therefore budget consuming. And then the action that comes of them is, it has to be kind of prioritized against all of the other analysis and data and what we've already defined as priorities. And I think that when you're thinking from like a search perspective, when you think from like whether we're talking about AI or we're talking about traditional search engines, it's kind of the only thing, like your competition. Like I've told my clients this for years. If you were to take you and your top 5 competitors out of the ether, you do not exist, Google's putting somebody in the results, right? ChatGPT is putting somebody in the results. Like there is always competition out there. So having an intimate understanding of what the other guys are doing is wildly powerful. And again, like when you talk about the Main Street businesses, that's extremely challenging because a lot of the data sets that are available today, many larger brands that have larger visibility can thrive off of that. There's a lot more competitive insight, but I don't know how Joe Schmo's Pizza Shop has got a line out the door every day, apart from the fact that, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives did a show on them at some point in time, right? Like, so how do I compete with that at a very, very specific level? And again, I think Yext, and I don't know if we want to talk about Scout at all, but Scout's pretty darn cool. In that context, it's very insightful. And I also would add to that, again, it is one component of a much, much larger strategy. So my ability to capture that data, analyze that data, and then create actionable intent, some type of output that's going to support me, needs to be swift.
Absolutely. Well, let's geek out about Scout for a second, since you brought it up. I'd love to.
Let's do it. No paid promotion involved here, by the way.
Yes. So Scout is Yext's data intelligence, competitive data intelligence agent. It goes out, it analyzes businesses' performance, stack ranked against 19 of its competitors in the hyperlocal market. And then it provides insights and recommendations for what to do. So I'd be really curious to hear, how are you using this data? Like what kind of insights are resonating with you and your clients from that, and how are you acting on it?
Admittedly, like when we first heard from Yext about Scout, I was kind of envisioning that as it being like a reporting enhancement. Like this would just be like one of the, because we have obviously our own system incorporates all sorts of reporting metrics. And my thought was, okay, this is great reporting, which I would say it absolutely is. Like there's no question there. But where we have seen, and where I should say our partners have seen a lot of value from it, is actually in like a prospecting, like a sales discussion, because it provides data again at such a granular level. And if people that are listening are not familiar with Scout, I mean, I can see, to what you just mentioned, I can see my 19 top competitors based on my business category at a very specific location, like a local level. And that level of insight, to come in to a sales discussion and say, hey, you've got 75 locations, 25 of them are best in class, and you've got another 50 or so that that could use work, and then you have 15 to 20 that basically have no visibility whatsoever. That level of insight is at the level that the business is looking at it, right? Like especially like a franchise. And in fact, I was actually talking to a franchise, and he's so devoted to supporting his franchisees, but he doesn't have that location level granularity in his data that he provides back to them. Well, Scout was an absolute game changer in that context. So it allowed him to more effectively support with budget, marketing resources. It allowed him to more effectively prioritize. It obviously allows my operations team to more effectively prioritize. And that was primarily in a pre-sale setting, but we use it also now to maintain campaigns and make our team more efficient.
Yeah, it's amazing. So Sam, when you're looking at that data and you're seeing 15 locations that are doing a fantastic job, do you take action on that in some way? You like let everything run, or you're like, I'm not doing paid spend here? Like, tell me what you've learned from the top performing locations.
Like the top performing locations, sometimes we find it's a certain level of activity tied to that location. It's like a certain a level of management, or maybe it is, in certain scenarios we found that like a regional manager is a little bit more involved and dedicated to certain activities than others. So that kind of reveals like maybe like a personnel kind of challenge. Obviously, that alludes to like certain levels of activity digitally, which plays a big role in obviously driving some kind of presence. But then it also kind of reveals for us like the market penetration, like the availability of new opportunity. We might find that we're performing extremely well in certain markets that are more competitive or less competitive, right? And then you get to look at those very specifically and say, well, if I'm in a more competitive market and I'm performing down, well, maybe there's some obvious answers there. If I'm in a more competitive market and I'm performing above the rest of the guys, well, there's absolutely something I need to learn. So again, it's a little bit of a directive, and it puts you down the path of where to pull more insight. And then when you kind of layer on the simplicity of being able to kind of query that data, again, it gets into the, how creative is your thinking around just like prompting that information. So you can reapply that in a number of different ways. Hopefully that answers your question there, Rebecca.
Yeah.
But it ultimately comes back to, it depends.
Yeah. In marketing, it always depends. And I'm a data-oriented person as well. I want to geek out a little bit too about how you're accessing these insights. So there are a lot of tools that will give you a corpus of data, but making sense of it can be really challenging. So one of the things about Yext and Scout, we make it available through the UI, so you can do dashboards and reports. We've got the API if you want to plug into your existing systems. And we just made the big announcement around MCP access to Scout. So you were one of the early adopters of the MCP. And first of all, love for anyone that is not familiar, how would you explain an MCP to our listeners that maybe haven't experienced it?
I mean, I like an MCP is having a coach that you can access at any point in time. Like I can ask questions about a certain, it is a specialist that is specialized in a very specific topic I'm using. But it is, I think being able to have somebody that is effectively at your beck and call and is ready with the deepest level of insight into some kind of data. I mean, the UI is pretty solid in of itself. The API is great, but you go to any development engineering team and you talk about API, and then the next question is like what the sprint schedule looks like. So the MCP is absolutely game changing in that it's just, I mean, like it's just there now. I mean, it's just available to us. So yeah, I was kind of alluding to it before, but being able to again quickly understand who are my top performers, who are my bottom performers, what's the competitive density look like, what are the major gaps in terms of how people are managing their Google business profiles or their listings, and then also like who out of that competitive list could be my next prospect. Right? Like all of these different types of insights are extremely available for me. So it takes that morning coffee view of data and it just takes it to the absolute next level. I think this is like thematically the AI discussion, right? Just simplifying the ability to capture and analyze and parse through data. That's where the MCP has been such a significant game changer for us. I mean, the one thing that I would add to that, and this is where AdCelerant is planning to go with this, we have our own AI built into our own system, and that AI has been trained with 14 years of campaign data, millions and millions of data points, and it's across, we have 160 or 5-ish different advertising products. So when you think about the level of data and how it can be broken down by industry, market, budget, advertising type, various regulations and compliances, seasonality, whatever we really want to, if we can marry that paid data, which is primarily paid, not exclusively paid data, up with something like we see at such a granular, hyper local level like Scout, right? I mean, we kind of take it to a level that is just mutually beneficial, right? Because it makes sure that we're making the right recommendations. We work with a lot of like legacy partners, like legacy media partners rather. And, these are people that have probably been selling print or TV spots or radio spots for maybe like 25, 35 years, so some, Joe Schmo off the street come in and say, hey, you should sell SEO or AIO or whatever you want to call it. They're like, I don't know where to start. Well, we can make a much, much more informed decision. We can educate them properly, and we can make that recommendation based off of the data that we've gathered from, again, years of insight, an understanding of their industry, traditional CNA and discovery information, and just marry that up into a way that you wouldn't be able to poke many holes through.
It's really kind of magical to think that for the first time you can take these incredibly deep insights that you've amassed over 14 years, marry them with insights from a platform like Scout, in all of these other things, put them into one, accessible place for you then to, as you said, sit down with your cup of coffee and ask a question.
Yeah.
So I'm curious,
Yeah.
are the possible, do you have a favorite prompt or query that you ask when you pop in or that you would like to ask? Something you've never been able to get an answer to before?
Oh man, I got to look through my prompt history here. I'm sure that I have asked some bizarro questions. I don't know. That's actually a really good question, Rebecca. What I will say is the one that's kind of on my radar right now. I'm a big Screaming Frog guy for all of my SEO nerds in the room. I love Screaming Frog. I've been using it for forever. That platform is quite complex, and it has been. It really can test like the level of understanding of that software and how to apply it. But the best way of using it was to like run your crawl, export the data, and then kind of be an Excel user or Google Sheets user and just kind of like get through the data that way, and then come with recommendations. Well, now it has like an MCP directly in Claude, right? So like that's kind of been my, as of the last, I think they launched that not even like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, um, has been where I'm nerding out. But it's again, it's not so much like the questions that are prompts that I'm putting in aren't so like unique, I suppose. They're standard more or less for an SEO, but it's this the ability to streamline is absolutely insane.
It's incredible. What are you doing with all that time that you're saving?
Hanging out with my twin boys, or I don't know, working on my car in my garage, something like that.
Uh, that's great. Christian and I often joke that we're getting time back and then just plugging it right back in to learn and grow. The curiosity never ends. Sam, this has been awesome. I want to move into our final segment, which is the start, stop, and rethink component. And I want to ask you
Yeah.
this on two levels because you
Okay.
do operate at two levels. So for the first one, what advice would you give to the publishers and digital agencies that you support? What should they stop doing, start doing, and rethink entirely?
I would stop spending so much time on what to recommend this customer and how to how to make an informed recommendation. I think I would start using things like AI to assist with that. Rather, like I would obviously not do that. You should make an informed decision. But like I use agents, for instance, as like brand guides. Like if I have a prospect that I'm working with, I'll build a Gemini, and I will feed that my CNA, like my customer needs analysis, my discovery information, history on who they've worked with previously. Like that is my source of truth, so to speak. So that at any point in time in the future, I want to make a recommendation. Well, it's assisted effectively. So I would make sure that AI is there to kind of gather that kind of insight. And then obviously when you get into more detailed analysis, I look at a lot of, again, like my legacy sellers, and some of the ones that are a bit more eager are going to kind of lean on a resource like that to to gather more insight, to articulate the value of the campaigns that we're running for them, to kind of evaluate feedback and to make an informed kind of response, those kinds of things. Also building decks, like pulling together resources and creative and things like that. It's amazing. Like we shouldn't be spending so much time on
Sure did.
making something pretty.
I have stopped. I have stopped creating all internal decks on my own. We just had a big marketing all hands this morning, and I worked with Claude to refine all of my thoughts. Worked on a talk track that has the brand guidelines, and I created all the slides, and it saved me so much time and headache. I hate creating
Yeah.
slides. It's my least favorite thing to do.
Yeah. No, I used to enjoy it, which is hilarious because now anytime I have to create slides, I'm like, who can I delegate this to?
Yep, exactly.
There's Claude, or there's Gemini, or there's ChatGPT. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a major piece. And to something to start, I would just like if they're not doing it already, I mean, start messing around with agents and MCPs and thinking about all the time consuming things, or the the thought consuming things that maybe can be more efficient.
Sam, do you think someone needs to be technical to use an MCP?
Uh, I don't think somebody needs to be technical. I think somebody needs to be thoughtful. Like the trouble that I see with like the agency model, mostly in the States, is we ask the question like, are you doing this marketing tactic? Yes or no? And if no, well, you should go do it, right? Whereas like the question really needs to be, have you tried this marketing tactic and did it work out for you? Like I think we too often get into this thought process of we have to do everything all the time, and I think that that's where like you don't have to be so technical obviously to use an MCP, but you do have to be kind of thinking about the prompt, in this context obviously like marketing advertising solutions, in the context of how is this going to support the business, and how is this ultimately going to lead to the objective that they are here for me for, right? So no, I don't think somebody has to be technical, but I think you have to kind of deepen the layer of thinking.
Okay, excellent. Oh, and then Vital, what's the final stop, start, and reset from the perspective of the clients that your clients are serving?
Well, the thing that I've been getting more recently, which I love, is that's sarcasm, by the way, is when somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, I went to ChatGPT and they told me I should be doing X, and your SEO strategy or what have you is doing Y." Okay, that's fair enough. I think that there's probably like an over reliance on AI in some cases, until AI ultimately gets to a point where it's fully integrated with like your CRM, your any kind of competitive metrics, all of your on-site analytics, your inventory system, your general interest and sentiment, your historical marketing advertising initiatives. You're going to get perhaps some misleading recommendations. Well, that's not to say when somebody.
Oh, sorry. The LLM always seems so confident when it's giving a recommendation, right? Even if it's grounded in nothing, it's just like, yeah, this is absolutely what you should do. And if a small business owner doesn't know that, that's not the right strategy, they might just do it.
Well, it strokes your ego way too often. You have to, like, we were talking about that before. It's like ChatGPT is like way too, everything's, oh my gosh, what a great thought. Well, that's not always the case, right? We can be challenged still. So I think that's probably, I think that's the main thing is like, don't take it all as gold, but definitely get creative with it, use it in unique ways. And as far as like the start thing goes, again, like start to think about AI as what are those things that I maybe have put off over the last year or years that I wasn't able to efficiently scale because of resources, because of time, because of budget, what have you. Because really we need to, if we look at our digital presence, there is no silver bullet. We need to kind of broaden that presence and be able to evaluate data very effectively from each of those and understand which ones work best for me at this time. And then I can lean in a little bit further and broaden and lean in further and broaden. So I actually go back to grade school when we learned about like the scientific method where you like build a hypothesis, you test your hypothesis, you evaluate your results, you go back and rehypothesize. Like that's SEO, that's advertising, that's marketing. Like you got to do those things. If you're not doing those things, use AI to facilitate that. And that's probably where I take it.
Well done. Remembering the scientific method.
I know.
No, but it's spot on. It is, marketing and SEO are, like it's a science in a lot of ways. So that's fantastic. Sam, this was so great to have you on the Visibility Brief. How can people connect with you to stay in touch and learn more?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Sam Rahimi. Samad's my full name. I'm Persian if I didn't say that already, but people call me Sam. You can find us at AdCelerant.com, AdCellerant.com. Yeah, thank you so much for joining and sharing your insights. And we'll have you back in the fall to talk about Looking forward to it.
What else you've uncovered with the MCP. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Rebecca. Appreciate it.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Visibility Brief. If you found this useful, subscribe, leave us a review, or send this to a colleague who needs to hear it. We'll see you next time.